Now, if you follow the channel for any length of time, you probably heard me say I don't like talking about politics. And while the economy and politics tend to go hand in hand, I generally stay away from it and talk about data. However, today ain't that day. The White House just laid down the ultimate in bullshit, and I'm here to tell you why. Okay, so you want to know how the White House is screwing you, but before we do that, let me give you a bit of a primer. Everybody knows the classical definition of a recession, and if you don't, just type it into Google. It comes up 2 successive quarters of negative GDP growth or the economy shrinking. That's 6 months. That's the definition. It's plain as day. That's what happens. And guess what? The National Bureau of Economic Research is a nonprofit which then looks at the data and says, hey, we're in a recession. That declaration of a recession is retroactive to that first month of negative GDP growth. And that is what happened every single time there's been 2 quarters successively for the last 10 recessions. But the White House says, no. We've got a different definition. So allow me to retort. While some maintain that 2 consecutive quarters of falling real GDP constitute a recession, that is neither the official definition nor the way that economists evaluate the state of a business cycle. Yeah, White House, what in the actual shit? Because last time I checked when I go to Google and I type that in, that is the technical definition. And for the last 10 recessionary economies, that was in fact what was the period of time that the National Bureau of Economic Research called a recessionary economy. And now this time you would like it to be different? I wonder why. Perhaps the perception of a president who wants to get reelected is concerned with his image, which is already at a historical low point for presidencies. And he wants to avoid a possible recession during his term, particularly when the midterms are coming up and the election for the next president comes up in November of 2024. So clearly there is a bias and a motivation, but the White House goes on to further characterize what they think should be a recessionary economy. Instead, both the official determination of recessions and economists' assessment of economic activity are based on a holistic look at data, including the labor market, consumer and business spending, industrial production, and incomes. Based on these data, it is unlikely that the decline in GDP in the first quarter of this year, even if followed by another GDP decline in the second quarter, indicates a recession. Now that seems to be mighty convenient. We're going to throw out a second definition for a recessionary economy, which doesn't match what we've done for the last 10 recessionary economies, and we're going to say that this nebulous definition, which has no quantifiable metric, has any way for us as the American people to say, are we in a recession or are we not? Particularly when you cite things like lagging indicators of the economy like unemployment. Unemployment goes up typically after you've already entered into a recessionary economy. And if you're already seeing the layoffs on the news, which are happening very, very frequently at this point in time, guess what? That's because it's a lagging indicator of the recession that we are already in. Adding further fire to this problem is the fact that the White House releases this statement 1 week before the new GDP number for the second quarter is supposed to be announced. Now, if you've been tracking things that track in as close to real time as you can get for GDP, like the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now number, which has gone from slightly negative to increasingly negative to now negative 1.5, which is actually worse than the first quarter's GDP number was, you can almost rest assured that GDP for Q2 will be negative, and you can pretty much guarantee the economists in the White House knew that. So this is nothing more than a passive-aggressive attempt to put pressure on the National Bureau of Economic Research to not declare a recession for political reasons. And that, my friends, is complete bullshit. And that is the realm of politics that I'm willing to get into at any point in time, because that's not right. It's extremely misleading to move the goal. If you're at the 10-yard line and you're about ready to score a touchdown and somebody comes out and says, you know what, we're going to add another 50 yards to the field because that's the real touchdown yardage, you're going to say, what the hell does that even mean? That's crazy. Well, that's what the White House actually just did to you, the consumer. You boil and bake in all these problems and you wonder why people get confused. It's not confusing. The declaration of a recession after 2 trailing 6-month periods, 2 quarters, is retroactive to January 1, which means the entire time the White House and several key people in business and in politics were telling you that you were okay, we can provide a soft landing, even the Fed was saying that to you, they were wrong. They were saying it during what will ultimately be defined as a recession unless the White House gets its way and they can push back and hold this off for a greater length of time. This is super, super key for you to understand, because what comes next? By the time you see this video, that GDP number will be out. And what we do as a nation and how we accept the current state of affairs of the economy is incumbent upon us to be with our eyes wide open. Because guess what? That 9.1% inflation is not core inflation. The real impact to you, to me, to everybody else around us is significantly higher. And you know what that equates to? That equates to lower wages for you and for me, for everybody else, because we've all effectively had a pay cut because things just cost more. Don't buy into the rhetoric. Just because it's the White House and it looks like an official message doesn't mean that it's a good one for you. It doesn't mean that it's a real one. The National Bureau of Economic Research should do the right thing and declare a recession if second quarter GDP is negative. Thank you for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button, send to your friends, tell everybody we're amazing. We'll catch you next week.